I'm going to be talking about HTML5 JavaScript APIs. And this is the kind of picture I think of the sharks for me are HTML5, and the freaking lasers on the top are their APIs, the JavaScript APIs in there, because the HTML5 spec is absolutely massive, but there's a huge focus on the language that's in HTML5, and that's just like a tiny bit of the iceberg. The really chunky bit of the spec is the JavaScript APIs. So I'm going to kind of show you some of those. I'm going to show you some of the code that's in the JavaScript APIs and show you how they can be used. Before I jump in, I wanted to mention 2022 because that's the date that rings with HTML5 as well. And it came out of an interview with Ian Hickson, who's the editor of HTML5 with Tech Republic. And 2022 is the date that two browsers have a completely interoperable implementation of HTML5. So to put that in some kind of context, CSS 2.1 only has one complete implementation in IE 8, but I'm still using CSS 2.1, and I'm pretty sure if any of you guys are doing any web stuff, you're using CSS. So that's not going to stop me from using HTML5 in my apps today. So HTML5 is this large collection. This is just some of the JavaScript APIs on there. So there's drag and drop, there's the history API, and so on. But what I want to talk to you about is HTML5, which the only difference being is that there's stuff that was ripped out of the HTML5 spec and put into separate specs. So I'm going to touch on web forms. You should be able to see the other side, but web forms, the media elements, canvas, and offline applications. And this stuff isn't in the HTML5 spec. They were pulled out, and they're now in their own separate specs. But they're pretty cool and interesting APIs, I think. I want to show you how it all works. So web forms works in Opera and some of Safari. And I'm kind of starting with one that makes us not have to do as much work. That's a Flickr search for web forms. That's just Stormtrooper. I'm not sure why. So JavaScript originally, like back in the day, it was good for form validation and image rollovers. That's kind of where we've all come from. And image rollovers was solved with this hover pseudo-class, and now we have web forms to handle form validation. So JavaScript's only good for awesome shit now. So what this is this is straight markup on the page where I've put a form on the page, nothing special on there, initially no JavaScript. The input type up here has type is email, and in Opera, because it has all the web form 2.0 stuff, it will immediately validate my email address for me. So Donkey doesn't validate as a real email address. But when I submit the form, I've got this tiny piece of JavaScript where I can actually hook in and say, is the form valid? The point being is that it's less donkey work for us guys to do. We don't have to write the JavaScript that does the form validation every single time. I mean, there's libraries out there to do this stuff for us, but if we don't have to keep adding this stuff that's really, you know, it's like DOM scripting. DOM scripting's been solved. Cross-browser problems are being solved with, you know, JavaScript libraries. If we can get rid of the form validation problem, it means that we can start, you know, writing more interesting JavaScript and not have to handle those problems. My kind of dream for the moment is these libraries detect web form support, and if it's not there, they kick in and kind of add the web form support. But I know there's kind of discussion as to whether or not the specs are right and so on. But that's my dream. I mentioned Safari has web forms 2.0 support as well. So you can the way that they're making use of it is in their kind of assistive device. So on your iPhone, these are the keyboards that come up for the different input types. And you can see on input type is tel, you get the numerical pad. So I believe Modernizer is looking for is checking the input types and telling you whether or not these input types are available, and it's pulling up a false positive in WebKit because the desktop browser thinks that it can handle the telephone input type. It's actually the mobile phone version. What's that? No, I know it's WebKit's fault. It should be, the desktop should say, no, I don't support this. But, you know, maybe there's going to be an assistive device attached to the computer that, you know, is looking for this kind of thing. So, yeah, it is the browser's fault. So I'm moving on to media elements, and that's basically audio and video, and they both extend out of this media element. I'm going to focus on a video for this section. So this is embedding a video into a page now, which is compressed down to this one line with the media element. And there is kind of the problem of Betamax versus VHS, the codec wars. And originally the spec had discussions about telling the browsers which codecs they had to implement, and that all went out the window because they can't, for instance, Firefox is open source, so it can't implement a patented or a closed source codec. So that's now handled by the browsers, so we now have two input types. And you've got to kind of wonder about the guys who don't support the video elements. Opera 9.6 did support video, but it doesn't anymore, and it's supposed to soon. But IE doesn't support video just yet, and Dion mentioned the release date is 15 years away, so it's a while before IE will. So we need to take our nice four-line job and turn it into this to look for QuickTime and then to look for the Flash object. So you can drop down the support to defer back onto the nasty, massive Flash thing. But we're going to look at this, and the API is attached to the video element. So this is a quick hack I put together the other night. My cat Dizzy being Dizzy. And down at the bottom of this is my control. So I've got a button that stop-start and this timer, which could be a progress bar. But the code is really simple. It's when I click on the pause button, I check if the video is paused in the first place. I check the property video ended, and if it has ended, I set the time back to the beginning. And if they've clicked on it, I just play the video. Otherwise, I pause the video. I realized about 10 minutes ago that this code is a little bit wrong. The order's wrong, but you guys aren't going to work that out just until you play with it. So, the videos also have, or the media elements also have events attached to them, and in particular the time update event, which progresses as the video goes along, so you can hook into these events. And in my demo, I'm just setting the current time. I'm just formatting it as a time and updating the progress slider, basically. So the API is really simple for video and audio. You've got play, pause. You've got these events, can play, tells you the actual element is ready to be used. And then you can hook into the ended event. And I kind of see you could create a really interactive kind of video on the side. And in fact, you could have these videos, and you could have the points at which the slides change, have a JSON file that's attached to that, and make them progress actually in the browser. In testing, browsers tend to be rather quiet about bugs with video. So Firefox, if you don't give it the right content type, it just doesn't do anything. It doesn't throw an error, it just doesn't do anything. You get a black screen. Safari, if you tell it it's a text HTML page, if you give it content type of text HTML, then it'll just plow on and just try and read the media and just play it in the browser. Accessibility is a big question. There's a lot of kind of discussions going on in America at the moment about accessibility. But this is a video that I found which is using the progress event, the time update. And it's got this JSON file with the subtitles to the video, and they basically create captioning, which I think is really interesting, because this could be then fed out to a Braille machine assistive device. So I think there's a lot of opportunity inside of that. So the canvas is kind of the other really sexy part of HTML5, which works in these browsers, and with a bit of kicking from XJS will work in IE as well. So you've seen some of these demos in Dion's talk as well. They're good for games and bacon, basically. I'm going to show you how to do this code, in Canvas, and it's just a simple gradient. So in my markup, I've just got this canvas element, and I get the 2D context of the canvas. There's 3D stuff that's kind of being worked on and separate, but at the moment the canvas is just 2D. And I'm creating this gradient object with the top left and the radius of the first circle, and the outer radius is the top left as well. Adding color stops, setting the gradient to my canvas, and then filling that canvas itself, and it gives me this nice gradient. Really, really sexy, which I couldn't do in Photoshop in 2 minutes. But there's other really nice features inside of the canvas, like things like you can do to data URL, so you can actually get all the raw data out of the canvas and save that as an image. So you could have your Photoshop app and you could literally just save it to your desktop using this toData. And then you've got the canvas plus draw image plus video equals Frankenstein. It's some kind of massive mashup, but it's a really cool Frankenstein because you get to do things like this. And again, I knew Dion was going to have these slides in here, so I haven't just stolen them from this previous one. But what's going on here is, this is the explanation from their blog post. What they've got is the thing that's playing is actually a canvas element, and there's a timer reading off a hidden video and grabbing that image and putting it into the canvas. And then when you click on one of these patterns, it takes that and maps it onto the canvas as well. But the really, really interesting bit is this canvas get image data. So they're getting this data back from the canvas at that point in time, that particular frame, and they're going through each one of the pixels and looking for the white spots. And at that point, when they find that white spot, they've got their coordinate to map that extra canvas over the top of it, which is how it's working. So there's two ways of doing it. The code in that demo is looping on like a 4-step, so it's taking every 4th pixel, checking what the value is, and then working out what the position of the laid-on pattern is. You can also have a kind of really small canvas hidden away at the side and go through every one of those pixels. So this is the same video that I had before. I've created the canvas element next to it. I've translated the canvas so it's kind of flipped it vertically. And then I'm drawing the video on progress, and it's creating this mirror effect next to it, which is pointless for a cat. But you can see how Safari has those inverse mirrors, shadow, the mirror effect underneath their videos, and there's a lot of stuff that you could do with a video and canvas. You could use it for a lot of evil as well. I can imagine the flash nasty ads that you get from the ad agencies. So if anyone can promise not to tell the ad agencies, I think we're going to be good. How am I doing for time? Anyone? Okay? Okay, screw it, I'm going to keep going. Oh, cool. Okay, so offline applications is in Safari and Firefox 3.5, except there's a huge bug in Firefox 3.5, so it doesn't actually work. They fixed it, as far as I've seen, and it's in the beta, but it hasn't made it into the actual release version. So I'm just going to show you offline applications in Safari. What it gives us is this application cache. So kind of in a way, when IE4 had offline mode, we've now got it today, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years later. But it just creates an offline mode, basically. You've got events like offline and online that will trigger when you pull out the connection or you go down to no reception. And you have this navigator.offline property, which in my tests doesn't prove anything. You can be completely disconnected from the internet, and online will say true. So I'd recommend not relying on those just yet. But the offline and online events do fire when you kind of disconnect and so on. So this is a demo I hacked together of a Rubik's Cube on my iPhone. So if you have an iPhone and you try and navigate to a page when you don't have any reception, you don't get the page at all. Nothing loads up. You just get this white screen and you're like, crap, I just wanted to look at that piece of text. The thing about this screenshot is that it's in airplane mode. So I can navigate to that URL and it will load it up because I've got the offline applications enabled on this web page. So this looks like this. You add the manifest attribute to your markup. You point it to a file. And inside of that file, you have this line at the top says cache manifest. And you include the files that you want to have as marked as offline, available offline. The other thing is the file that's including this manifest also gets included. So my app.html has been included in the manifest. And I've included a version number at the bottom, which I'll come on to in a second. So the first line needs to be manifest. You have to serve it as cache manifest. The version number, what that's for is if you touched a file, so if you change the timestamp on the file, the browser won't go and get it again. It's only if you change the contents of the file. Like the offline assets can be updated, you can delete them, and your web page will still work, and it will still think they're there. By having a version number in there, the contents of the manifest changes, the browser then picks that up and reloads your cache. There's also the application cache, which is like the API to kind of get updates from that. You can't clear out the cache through this API. when you call the update, it doesn't actually go off and refresh the cache or anything like that. It notifies you that there is an update. You could force a reload of the page, but I haven't quite worked out how to really reload the cache properly. I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend, if you use offline apps, add it last. Finish your application, then add the manifest afterwards, because of this versioning, and I'll show you the process that happens behind the scenes, you can get in a real mess as to what state your cache is in. So the process is, you can't even see the background. Oh, that sucks. Okay. The browser makes the request. It goes off to the server, and the server serves up all the contents of that web page, so the images and so on. The browser says, I see a manifest file. So it tells the server, I want all that stuff again. So the server gives back the manifest assets. So I don't know why there's like this double hit. I haven't been able to work out from the spec that it says you need this double hit, but that's what Safari is doing at the moment. The browser then triggers this event to say the cache has now been updated. And when you reload the browser, it'll say, I have a manifest for this domain, this URL. So just request that manifest file. The server then goes, yeah, that hasn't changed, so I'm going to send you a 304, and the browser serves everything locally. So that's what's happening on my iPhone when I visit that offline version of that Rubik's Cube. So it's accessing everything locally. So storage is the first one. It was recently ripped out of the HTML5 spec. And yeah, it's basically giant cookies, because cookies are 4K, storage is a lot bigger. As far as I can tell, there's no documentation on how big the key value pair storage can be. So key value pair is literally just like cookies. You set the key and you've got the value. It works in most of the browsers. SQLite only works in Safari, and again, as Dion said, there's kind of discussions about whether SQLite's the right thing. Storage is really, really simple. You have these two objects. One's called session storage, which is the window-based, so it's that particular session. So if you open a new window, it doesn't apply anymore. And you've got local storage, which is attached to the domain. And you just have set item and get item, and it just retrieves them and set them and so on. The set item, you can only set strings. So if you can't pass in an object or anything like that, anything more complicated. But you could convert it to JSON, stick it in there, or JSON, just get it out and convert it back out again. So this is what it looks like in Safari's debugger. Again, I don't know if there may be a Firebug plugin for Firefox to actually inspect this kind of stuff, but I haven't seen it yet. It's also quite difficult to debug and get you've got this field here, but in Firefox, I can't see any way of getting rid of that kind of stuff. You can delete the offline cache through the properties, but you can't clear out this kind of stuff. But you can do just session storage.clear, and it will get rid of it for you. Sorry, I should go back. That timestamp field, that's not a property that comes with it. This is just the timestamp field that I added from this test page. So the spec for HTML5 recently changed with regard to SQLite, and whereas before they were trying to spec out SQLite, they've just changed it and pulled out the whole thing and said the user agent should implement whatever 3.6.19, whatever that is. And SQLite, SQL also, when it fails, it does it pretty quietly as well. If it screws up, there's something really wrong. There's error handlers, so you can pass in kind of success handlers and error handlers, but when it screws up, it just doesn't really tell you about it. So it's pretty hard to debug when you're messing around with it. This is what the syntax looks like. So you open your database, you tell it what database you want to create, you give it a version number so you can actually increment your version numbers. This is the default table, and you give it a size that you want to play around with. I suspect there's an upper limit to how big you can make your database. I think it's 2 meg or something. And this is how it works. So you call this the transaction, and you get a callback with the transaction object, and you run your SQL against it. And it's all kind of callback based. So you run your SQL, and once that's finished, you get a callback with the result. But the SQL is pretty easy to run. And you can also, you've got a command line in Safari as well that you can just type your SQL and run it and see the result, and you can dip into the database and the tables and look at the fields and so on. yeah, it's pretty straightforward, but again, because it's just text, I don't see a particularly big advantage over just using key value pair, unless you're doing something much more complicated in terms of kind of rational requests. So geolocation is also one of those cool APIs which everyone's kind of going geo mad, and it works in Firefox out of the box, and it works in the iPhone. So the iPhone has it baked into it as well. So this is what it looks like on the iPhone. It prompts you to ask you whether or not you want to share your location when my piece of JavaScript is trying to grab the location. And same on Firefox, there's like a bar across the top that says, do you want to share your location? Do you always want to share your location? And so on. It doesn't always work. I was sat on the south coast of England, and it said I was in the middle of London. So the important thing about this is make sure you've got some kind of fallback. Don't rely entirely on geolocation that's baked into the browser. Make sure that, I would suggest kind of using it to try and sniff where they are, and then let them specifically point where they are, or say, no, I'm not there, that's complete rubbish. The API looks like this, which, again, I believe it's straight out of kind of the Gears spec, which Dion can nod or shake. Yeah, sort of. So it's hanging off the navigator object, geolocation.getCurrentPosition, success handler, error handler, and the object that comes back has this chords property, which has the latitude and longitude. There's also the accuracy, which I think is the thing I was ignoring when it said I was in the middle of London. So it tells you how high or close you are to that particular point. Obviously on the iPhone, where it pinned me down exactly to where I was sat, it works really well. Finally, web workers. Again, as Dean said, it's threading for JavaScript. It can be native or via Gears, and there was a hint of trying to write like a hack version using set timeouts. I had to play myself, and I got as far as completely breaking IE because it just hung. But I can envisage kind of hacks coming up that simulate workers to let you try and still use the syntax. The web workers are completely sandboxed environments, so it doesn't have access to the window object or the document object or any of the DOM. It's got access to things like the XHR and the web databases as well. And you communicate between your document and the worker and back and forth through the messages. Debugging, I found when I was playing with it early on, I wasn't 100% sure how to debug stuff. You've just got to send messages out. I mean, you may kind of simulate the console log inside your worker and spit messages out, but the communication is just plain text as well. So this is what a non-worker would look like. So what I'm doing is doing a bit of looking for a prime number, and I'm running a canvas at the same time. And I got my spinning ball of death. And this is what workers look like when I've kind of allowed this thread to run the number crunching. So a few important things for me is that the reflow is happening just fine. So the canvas is able to draw. The screen capture software may have not caught every single frame, but the canvas is able to draw. I'm still able to select text, and it's able to redraw the numbers as I'm spitting them back to the document. Inside of the worker, you have import scripts, post, message, on message, and connect. So I'm going to show you some of that syntax. So my main application creates this new worker object, and I give it the URL to the script. That needs to be on the same domain as well. And then I connect the on message, and I set up a handler. And an event comes into this, and I've got event.data is the actual message that was sent to me. I can then post messages to my worker, and those are strings as well. Inside my worker script, I can import other libraries. And I can have my on-message handler, which the syntax is literally on-message. I think you can do this.onMessage, but it's just the exact same thing. It captures the event, and if you want to get the message that was passed into the worker, you need to do event.data, and that's the actual content. And then the data that's sent back out again is you use a post message, and whatever text you have is going to go back out the door. You can't send objects; it's just plain text at the moment. I can't remember if the plan is to have objects that go out, but Firefox and Safari only support plain text going in and out. So if you want to trigger a function, the way that I've been doing it is putting a prefix and searching for a caret, and that's the function I want to call. And and then I run that piece of code according to what the worker just told me to do. And there's a lot more in HTML5. So this has just been a summary. I mean, there's the sandbox iframes, XHR2. There's progress events in the XHR object, so you can tell how far along your upload or download has happened. The query selector API is basically native CSS selectors. There's ARIA overlap in HTML5 in the spec as well, which I think is really exciting. Drag and drop, if anyone read PPK's overview of drag and drop, that's definitely worth looking at because it's a good laugh. He basically destroys the spec. And lots of other things. The documentation was a little bit hard to find, but because they've now gone into last call, it's going to start syncing over to the W3C documentation. So what wg.org/HTML5 is the complete spec. There's also a kind of paginated version. The wg complete, I've just created a shortcut. This is a version of the spec that includes all of the specs that have been ripped out. There's if you're kind of looking for something that's suddenly disappeared from the spec, if you go to dev.w3.org/HTML5, there's a directory of different kind of things that have been ripped out of other specs. It's a nice place to kind of go and have a look for stuff that's missing. And equally, the IRC channel is quite handy if you're playing around with brand new code that you have no idea why it isn't working. Things like the offline manifest, I couldn't work out why I couldn't get it to refresh. So if you jump on the IRC channel, there's only a few guys on there, but they do come back and answer your question. I mean, leave it a few minutes, but they will get back to you. So that's my overview. That's my GeoCities version of the closing page. So if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to take them if I have time. Otherwise, lunch. Any questions? Yeah? Sorry, HTML5 is on the... It's just, so the question is, HTML5 is currently being proposed. CSS 2.1 spec isn't a final recommendation. But we all use it, yeah? It's pretty well baked into the browsers. The browsers are adding support pretty quickly. Mobile devices are adding support pretty quickly. The spec has gone to last call, which means that they're not really making any more changes. But it's down to the browsers. I mean, HTML5 is it's a validation. It's just validation. I can use all this technology. I don't have to make it an HTML5 validated document. I can use content editable, or I can use drag and drop. It's in the browser already. And one of the key mantras of HTML5 is they're paving the cow paths. So the technology already, a lot of these technology already exists inside of the browser, and they've spec'd it out so all the other browsers can standardize against that. So a lot of it is in there. Content editable is an example of so on Flickr, when you click and you can change the title, content editable gives you that, but it's been around for such a long time that it's actually in all the browsers. And because they've documented it now, that it's there. And I think it's got pretty good support in IE, which is, surprising. Well, but they came up with it, so, it should be. Anyone else? Cool. Lunch, yeah? Thanks.